Hi, I'm Dave, and welcome to the Trull Gallery. Today, we're going to see if we can get a smooth finish on an open grain wood without killing myself. I recently built a bar with a red oak top, and I ran into several challenges while finishing that top. And my clients had asked for a companion piece to go with it. And I want them to look the same, but I don't want to have all the headaches I had the first time around. So I dusted off something that I learned nearly 40 years ago, but we're going to use some updated technology to go with it. So let's see if that works. Or not. After assembling and sanding this red oak countertop, I stained it with a standard oil stain from the big box store and let it dry overnight. The next day I gave it a quick wipe down with a microfiber cloth to remove any dust, and it was ready for filler. For this project I'm using Aquacoat Clear Wood Grain Filler. This product seems to be easy to use. Simply spread it on using a plastic squeegee or an old credit card, working first across the grain, then coming back to remove the excess by wiping with the grain. I worked in small sections so the filler didn't cure before I could wipe it off. This product can be put over stained wood like I'm doing, or you can fill the grain and then stain after. One problem with staining after you've filled the grain is the wood won't accept as much of the stain as it would if it were raw. Since I'm matching an existing piece, I wanted to ensure that I got the color on the wood first. The Aquacoat is fast drying. After about 45 minutes, you can sand the surface with 220 grit paper and reapply the next coat. They recommend 2 to 3 coats, and I decided to go with 3. After the third coat, I gave it one more sanding with 220 grit paper to level out the filler. With all that sanding, there were a few places where the stain was lighter than the rest of the top. I decided to push my luck and give the entire top one more coat of stain to even things out. I applied it as before, working in small areas, wiping the stain off, and then removing the excess with a second cloth. Then I set the bar aside to dry overnight. This is where I had my problems when building the bar, but I've learned from that. If you'd like to see the video on the bar top build, or the video of finishing nightmares that I went through, I'll link those videos below. Once the stain was fully dried, it was time for a seal coat. You cannot put a water-based finish over an oil stain unless the stain is put directly on the wood. Since the Aquacoat provides a barrier between the wood and the stain, I chose to use an oil-based urethane to seal it in. One coat will seal that stain in, and the top was again set aside to dry overnight. Before completing the top, I took the time to give the underside a few coats of urethane. This equalizes the ability of the wood to absorb moisture, so one side won't take in more than the other. This helps the wood remain stable over time. Once that had dried, I gave the top another sanding at 220 grit with my random orbit sander to prepare it for the top coats. Before the next coat, the entire piece was wiped down with a microfiber cloth to remove any dust. I also follow that with a hand wipe, and while it's not very high tech, I can feel any of the remaining dust nibs and remove them before spraying. Now I'm ready for the next coat. I've switched to a water-based urethane as they're easier to clean up and dry quickly. And there's no worry about bonding as the oil-based urethane has locked in the oil stain and is cured long enough to bond with its water-based cousin. I sprayed my first top coat and took a look at it the next day. It's a nice finish, but it's not as level or as smooth as I'm going for. And while it may not be obvious here, it's easy to see after sanding. All those shiny spots are the low areas. Let's give it a few more coats of urethane and see what we come up with. After a total of 6 coats, I gave it one more sanding and everything looked good. This time I sanded at 220 and 320 grit to get it ready for the final coat. And you can see here the grain is nearly filled and looking good.
This one last coat and we should be there. And then my gun spat. I wiped the drips off as best as I could and carried on. I gave it a fairly heavy coat and hoped for the best. If necessary, I could always sand it down and try again. I got lucky and the urethane leveled out nicely, and I was just left with some specks in the finish. And a little work with a green scratch pad took care of those. I just made sure to work with the grain so I wouldn't add any swirls. I added a coat of paste wax, which I forgot to film, and let that sit for about 20 minutes. Once it was dry, I came back with a clean cotton rag and wiped off the excess wax, again working in the direction of the grain. I've had mixed results with power buffers, but I'm sure I'll try them again. I've also had mixed results with this particular paste wax. I don't love it, and I think I'll probably toss it and go back to something like brie wax. I always had good results with that, I just didn't have any in the shop. One more buffing in the morning and this should look fine. The key thing is, the open grain of this red oak is full, and I've got a smooth finish. The cool thing is that when this piece was set in place next to its big brother that I built a few weeks earlier, the two finishes looked identical, and this took much less time and effort.
I'll admit I was a little skeptical and a little gun-shy going into this project, but the grain filler worked like a champ. The new top matches the bar top perfectly. And while I don't often need a glass top finish on an open grain wood, it's nice to know that I can pull it off with some new technology. I'll certainly keep this one in the files. I'd love to hear your comments. Is there something I could have done differently, better, smarter, faster? Love to hear. Please drop them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving us a thumbs up and sharing it with your friends. If you haven't already, maybe it's time to hit that subscribe button and the little bell so you get notified every time I put out a new project. Not sure what's coming up yet, but it should be something interesting. So until then, have a great day. Take care, and we'll see you soon.